Hey everybody, it's your old pal Uncle Phil. And I'm still trying to keep up with this Sermons for Lost Socks, but there's just always something in life conspiring against me. So this is actually the one that should have happened last week. We had guests in town and then we had to leave town suddenly because of another thing. Anyhow, I was gone all weekend. So I'm finally catching up. It's been chaos. And this should have been the one that was, the text is from August the 9th, 2026. And I don't want to pass it up because it's just so good. It's got a couple of my favorite passages. So the first one comes from the Old Testament passage, and it's from 1 Kings 19. And this is where Elijah, if you don't know the story of Elijah, Elijah's an Old Testament prophet. But Elijah, he's kind of a badass because basically the whole story we get of Elijah is he just kind of goes, he bops from one incredible, brave situation. He's like super courageous, trusting in God, and then God does something amazing and delivers him or does some miraculous thing. Like it's pretty dramatic. It's pretty dazzling, his life, and up to this point. And then you get to this chapter, and Queen Jezebel goes, I'm going to kill that guy. And this prophet who has, been in life and death situations already for doing what God wanted him to do, somehow this edict from the queen just freaks him out. And he's like, I'm out. And so he runs out into the wilderness, sits down under a juniper tree and says, just let me die here. He says, it's enough now. I've done my bit. And now look, I got the queen wants to kill me. So just, Lord, kill me now. God, just kill me. I'm not better. His phrase is, I'm not better than my fathers. Like this isn't going anywhere. Like, who are we fooling? Just kill me now. And he lies down and he goes to sleep. And then he gets awakened by an angel who taps him and says, hey, dum-dum, I made you some food. Here's some hot cakes and some water. Drink, eat, and then go back to sleep. So that's kind of cool, right? You know, you wake up and an angel made you a meal. Then he goes back to sleep, sleeps again, wakes up, and again the angel wakes him up and says, hey, eat. But this time he says, you're going to have to go for a good journey. The point is he immediately is in a situation where he goes, I want to die. And the first thing God does, I love this. The first thing God does is he gets 2 nights of sleep and 2 meals out of the deal before there's any further progress in his life. You know, and I've said this before on this very channel that my dad, who was a counselor, for part of his career involved doing counseling, but people would come to him and they'd be like, my life's falling apart, everything's doomed. And he'd go, when's the last time you had 8 hours of sleep? When's the last time you had a nutritious meal? Like, let's do some biological things real fast because those affect the head. Let's get some things nailed down and then let's talk, because I don't want to talk to you if you're like all over the place physically, like, you know, biologically. Anyhow, it's not saying it's all can be solved with a nap and a snack, but a nap and a snack can solve a solid 50% of life's problems, I think. Anyhow, that's not even the story today. That's the setup, because now he wakes up and he goes and he runs and he gets to this place, right? And so it starts in verse 19:9 is where today, August 9th passage was. It says, he came to a cave and he lodged there. And behold, the word of the Lord came to him and he said, what are you doing here, Elijah? So God speaks to Elijah. Elijah goes into a cave and God says, what are you doing here? What are you doing here? Now, that question's a loaded question. I don't think he means like, there's a lot of discussion about what God's quite getting at in here. And, you know, it's a fool's errand to sit around and say, I know what God is trying to say in this situation. But I love, as a literature teacher, I love that it works on a lot of levels. One is that sort of, what are you doing here? And then it's, what are you doing here? You know, or then maybe it's, what are you doing here? You know, what are you doing here? Yeah, like it kind of works on a lot of levels, but it's an opening salvo to a conversation. It's a dialogue. God wants to have a dialogue with Elijah. He's fed him and napped him twice like a good little baby. And he says, now let's talk. Your last thing you said to me was you wanted to die. Now you've napped twice, you've eaten twice. Let's talk. What's going on? And Elijah says, I've been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. The sons of Israel have forsaken your covenant. torn down your altars, killed your prophets with the sword, and I alone am left, and they seek my life to take it away. So, yeah, this is pretty classic sort of woe is me. It's a touch of the martyrdom complex. I'm the last one. I'm the only one left serving you, God. You ever feel that way? You ever feel like I'm the only one? Everybody else is terrible, and I'm trying to do the right thing. I'm trying to be a good boy, and it's so hard because I'm the only one. So Elijah's like, I have, and it's true. He has been, as he says, very zealous for the Lord. And he says, I'm looking, and he goes, and yet your people, they forsake prophets. They tear down your altars. They forsake your covenant. They don't do what they're supposed to do. And I'm the only one left, and they want to kill me. All right. Now, it's always interesting when people get into these sort of shouting matches with God, because I think a lot of us were sort of maybe raised to think, you better be respectful and you better be cool. You need to calm down. Don't be disrespectful in any way to God. But what's funny is there's a pretty long history of people being pretty blunt with God. And I don't think you should be, like an asshole to God just flippantly. But I think we should also remember that God can kind of handle us being straight up and honest with him. And I think that's the big issue is, why would I try to be anything other than honest with God? Because he already knows what I'm thinking, right? I keep going back to Psalm 139. Before a word is on my lips, you know it completely, O Lord. Like, he's not, I can clean it up, but he knows where my head and my heart are. So I like that Elijah's like just sort of straight up. And so you never quite know exactly how that's going to play out. But then he says, all right, go. God says to him, go forth, stand on the mountain before the Lord. So walk out, you're in this cave in the mountain, walk out and just stand in the mouth of the cave. Behold, the Lord was passing by. That's kind of a big deal. God's passing by, right? I mean, you have this whole image of like, the idea that you can't look at God, and otherwise you're going to be killed. So this is the way God's passing by, is in all these forms, right? It says, behold, the Lord was passing by. A great and strong wind was rending the mountains and breaking in pieces the rocks before the Lord. But the Lord was not in the wind. So the first sort of manifestation of God's power is this wind that can literally is tearing apart rocks and mountains. That's a stout wind. It's rending apart the mountains, and it says, but God wasn't actually in the wind. And after the wind was an earthquake. Okay, that's more fireworks here. But the Lord was not in the earthquake. And after the earthquake, a fire. I guess here are the fireworks. That was the earthquake. You shouldn't use the word fireworks when there's going to be fireworks. And after the earthquake, of fire, but the Lord was not in the fire. So we've got the wind, we got the earthquake, and the fire. Earth, wind, and fire. Sorry. And now I'm going to have the song September in my head the rest of the day. You've got these three sort of natural disaster manifestations of God, and yet he's not technically in them. The text is very specific. Don't mistake the visible the sort of visible outcomes of God's power as God himself. He's even more than that, right? And after the fire, a sound of a gentle blowing. All right? So then there's just this whisper, this little whisper of a wind. And when Elijah heard it, he wrapped his face in his mantle and went out and stood at the entrance of the cave. All right? So you have this wind that tears apart things. You've got an earthquake, you've got fire, and then you got that sort of this gentle breeze. And at that point, Elijah goes, okay, I think this is when God wants to talk to me. And he wraps his mantle around his face. The idea, again, being, I can't look at God or I'll die. If I look at him directly, I'll die. So somehow Elijah knows this is God. This is the most present God is in this situation, and I don't want to risk getting killed. When he heard it, he wrapped his face in his mantle, went out, stood in the entrance of the cave, and behold, a voice came to him and said, what are you doing here, Elijah? Now, this is great because it's the exact same question you asked a minute ago. So you would think on some level that the setup here is God sort of saying, like, I'm reminding you of my power. I'm reminding you of how this works. I'm reminding you of my sovereignty, of my complete and total omnipotence. Like you don't need, like, I got this. Like, I'm not short on power. I'm not missing the plan. Like, I got this, Elijah. That's sort of what it feels like to me. Like, I've just seen this. So I'm going to ask the question again. And I don't think it's God sort of being arrogant. I think it's sort of, it helps put it in perspective. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I live at the foot of the Alps in Germany these days, and I look out my window and I see the tallest peak in Germany, Zugspitze. I look out at it every day. And I got to tell you, when I take the dog for a walk in the morning, I inevitably feel like a truck hit me because I'm a man of a certain age, and you just, you feel hungover even though you may not have had anything to drink the night before. That's sort of what happened to me in middle age. But I'm out with the dog and it's early and I'm like, ugh, and then I turn the corner and I see this mountain with a little bit of pink light shining on it, and I kind of go, oh yeah, God's in charge. God exists, and there's something much bigger going on. And I'm not even getting the light and sound show that Elijah's getting. So you kind of think that at this point, second time he gets asked the question, maybe he's going to go, let me think again on the answer. But this is what I love. Oh, I love this. He doesn't. God asked the exact same question in the exact same way, and Elijah answers the question in the exact same way. He goes, I've been very zealous for the Lord, the God of hosts. The sons of Israel have forsaken your covenant, torn down your altars, killed your prophets with the sword, and I alone am left, and they seek my life to destroy it. That whole show of God's power, that whole display of God's power, completely unfazed. Elijah is completely unfazed by it, and he's still just sitting there going, I'm unhappy. Alexander and the terrible, horrible, no good, very bad day. Like, I do not like it one bit. I don't like it. Again, you kind of think at this point, like, God might spank him pretty good. But I love the matter-of-factness of this whole thing. The verbal exchange is very matter-of-fact, because God then says to him, he doesn't lecture him. He doesn't say, you stupid, disrespectful little punk. It's really rude of you to not trust in my power. He doesn't do anything like that. The Lord said to him, go, return on your way to the wilderness of Damascus, and when you've arrived, you'll anoint Hazael king over Aram, and Jehu the son of like, you got work to do. Just get back and do the job. Nimshi you shall appoint over king of Israel, and Elisha the son of Shaphat you shall anoint as prophet in your place. Okay? And it shall come about, the ones who escape from the sword of Hazael, Jehu shall put to death, and the ones who escape the sword of Jehu, Elisha shall put to death. Yet I will leave this, and you're like, whoa, whoa, whoa. We just waded into a bunch of names and sort of sounded like almost genealogy-like. Yet I will leave 7,000 in Israel, all the knees that have not bowed to Baal, and every mouth that has not kissed him. Now, the reason that I bring this up is this is really important, because basically God is sort of just saying, I don't know what to tell you other than you're wrong about this. You're not the only one. The 7,000, he says, in Israel, that's a lot more than only one. Like, there's only one. If you're the only one, that means there's not 7,000. God says there's 7,000 that have not bowed the knee to Baal, and the mouths that are. There's a resistance going on, Elijah. There are people who are doing the right. You just said everybody's forsaken you. Everybody's given up except me. I'm the only one. Guess what? There's actually 7,000. That's nice to hear. He says, just get back and do the job, because I got this thing. I got it covered. I got a plan. And it's not pretty. I'm not suggesting there isn't sort of, it isn't a bumpy road. But what I'm telling you is your assessment of the situation is incomplete. Dare I say incorrect. From your perspective, you're the only one serving God. You're the last one left. And so there's just no point in trying, because nobody's changing. And from my perspective, you are one of 7,000. So, buddy, do your job. Do your job. Let me worry about what's going on. I got this. You know what you can do? You can do the thing that I asked you to do. Go do these jobs. And then I'll take care of the rest. And what's funny is, again, you might think to yourself, oh, Elijah, this is really embarrassing for him. He's, he's one of the, I would say he's like in the top 5, top 3 almost Old Testament, characters. Like, he's important. And along with Enoch, I think, the only one we can say didn't have to experience physical death. He's the one that chariot of fire, he gets carried away in a chariot of fire. He doesn't have to experience physical death. Like according to the Old Testament story, Enoch, there's this guy Enoch in Genesis, it says he walked with God and then he was no more, for God took him. And sort of the assumption is that like he was so godly that somehow he didn't have to, like God was like, why don't you just come over to my place? Let's just let's not go through this process. It's cloudy, but with Elijah, we're like, wow, that's kind of a privilege. I think physical death, most people would say, doesn't sound pleasant. And Elijah just gets to skip it. And still, he was kind of a little big baby in this situation. And what I love about this whole story is basically Elijah's kind of missing the boat. And God's so patient with him. God's so patient with him. Which leads me to the next passage. I want to look at the gospel really fast, which is in Matthew 15, maybe. Let's see. Or is it Matthew? Yeah, Matthew 15, verse 10. So in this passage, I think this is right. No, this is incorrect. It's Matthew 14. That's next week's. That's the one I'm going to do later. Matthew 14, 22. Jesus walks on water. Okay, yeah. So this is a nice sort of connective tissue to the Elijah story, and I think it's really great. Because it says, in the gospel, you've got the story where Jesus walks on water, Peter gets out of the boat. You may have heard this story. Again, if you're a kid like me and you had like picture book, Bible in pre-K and flannel graph, these were always the best ones where there was some there was some special effects going on. Anyhow, we're just picking up sort of as the action goes. Immediately, he made the disciples get into the boat, go ahead of him to the other side, and he sent the crowds away. After he sent the crowds away, he went up on the mountain by himself to pray. And when it was evening, he was there alone. But the boat was already a long distance from land, battered by the waves, for the wind was contrary. A storm came up. So Jesus has been teaching these multitudes, and he needs a little downtime to pray. He needs a little privacy to pray and little solitude. Introvert hangover. I don't think Jesus is particularly an introvert, but you get the idea. He needed a little time away from the crowd. And so he sends the disciples over in the boat. These are experienced fishermen, so they're used to boats. And he says, get over in the boat, get across the sea, and I'll meet you. I'm going to catch up with you. And so he says, he goes up and he's praying, and then he goes and he's going to walk and meet them. But a storm has whipped up on the Sea of Galilee, and they're out there and they're fighting the waves, man. It says they were being battered by the waves. The wind was fighting them. So they're out there, heave ho, trying to get from one side to the other. Terrible storm. And it says in the fourth watch of the night, this is between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m., Jesus comes to them walking on the sea. And when the disciples saw him walking on the sea, they were terrified and said, it's a ghost. Now, people, legends would happen that, the people drowned at sea and things like that would go walk around on the water as ghosts. And so there was some folklore around that. And it was stormy. So, probably mist and foam and rain and who knows what else going on, clouds. But they look out and they see a figure on the ocean. That's going to, on the Sea of Galilee, that's going to mess with your head, right? Like that's not a relaxing thing in the middle. You're already stressed out because you're trying to row for your life. And then you see what may be a ghost walking across the water. And this is what they say. They say it's a ghost, and they cry out in fear. But immediately Jesus spoke to them, saying, take courage, it's I, do not be afraid. Okay, now that immediately is important, okay? So he doesn't want them to sit there in fear. He goes, no, it's me. It's me. And there's some stuff here connected with the I am statements, and I'm not going to get into all the technicalities, but, it's a great moment. So you've got to have a beat here for a little brain adjustment. Like, I'm in a storm. At first, I thought it was a ghost. Like, you're having a range of emotions here. And then Jesus is suddenly like, no, 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 it's me. And so you're going to have to kind of click in and go, okay, so I guess we're doing this. Now they've seen miracles from Jesus. So, if you're paying attention, which honestly, the disciples weren't always. If you're paying attention, then it's probably a good idea to go, okay, all right, so he's doing something here. But Jesus, he immediately reveals himself, doesn't want them to sit there and wallow in fear, doesn't want them to be afraid. He goes, take courage. In fact, he says, it's I, do not be afraid. Peter, good old bull in the china shop Peter says, Lord, if it is you, command me to come to you on the water. All right? Now, there's your Greek scholars, which I'm not, but they'll tell you this is a first-class condition in Greek. If it is you, it's in other words, it'd be better probably to say since it's you. Tell me to come walk on the water. So Peter, and I love the visceral nature of Peter. Peter's like, okay, and look how quickly he goes through these thoughts. I'm on the boat. We're getting swamped. We're having this terrible storm. There's a ghost. Oh shit. Oh wait. The ghost says, no, it's Jesus. That's better. If it's really Jesus, wait a minute. He's walking on water. That's pretty amazing. Can I do that too? Click, 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 click. Peter goes, can I come? And Jesus says, come. Now, this is great because the other guys don't say come. The other guys don't say, can I come? They're still in the boat. Peter, good old Peter. Now, Peter makes some messes in the biblical record. Peter makes some boneheaded decisions in the biblical record. But Peter also goes for it. And I remember my dad. My dad was a really great musician. I mean, like classically trained, conservatory trained on trumpet, and then also voice lessons, like a vocalist, excellent vocalist as well. And so he was often involved in like leading choirs and singing things because he could do that. And he used to just get so frustrated when he would find somebody who was timid about singing. He was like, I would rather you go for it. And same with the trumpet, like any instrument. Like, I'd rather you go for it and be out of tune. I'd rather you go for it with some gusto, and we'll try to fix the out of tuneness, or you played a B flat instead of a B, or like go for it, but playing the right thing or singing the right thing in such a, I don't want to. That's a global problem. We can fix one note out of tune here. We can fix one wrong key on the piano. What we can't do is take somebody who's afraid to really be participating. That's a global problem. And that was something my dad used to say. He's like, yeah, just go for it. And then we can fix the technical mistakes, but if you're not giving it something, you got to put that passion in it. And this is what I love about Peter. Peter's kind of like that. Like, Peter plays some wrong notes. He hits some clams, man. And he honks a little bit when he plays, but he is never timid. He's there. And he's like, can I come out of the boat? And Jesus says, come on out of the boat. And for a second, it's pretty amazing. Peter got out of the boat and walked on water and came toward Jesus. Wow, how cool is that? How cool. Like, Elijah doesn't have to taste death, physical death. And Peter, one of two people, the other being Jesus, gets to walk on water. That's pretty cool too. Walking on water and came toward Jesus, but seeing the wind. People get hung up. They're like, you can't see the wind. It's a turn of phrase. Seeing the swirling, the storm going on around him. He became frightened and beginning to sink. He cried out, Lord, save me. Now, usually when you hear this sermon, the whole thing is sort of quietly shaming Peter. Like, look at him. He gets out there and he looks, and usually the tag sort of goes something like this, like when he takes his eyes off Jesus and he looks at the situations around him, he sinks, that's not an incorrect sort of analysis. I'm not saying that there isn't some validity to that. But it also sort of sets up this thing like, it almost becomes sort of backhandedly legalistic, because it's like, well, if you just if you just did the right thing and kept your eyes, then you wouldn't have sunk. Like then that becomes this sort of, it can really devolve into a prosperity theology pretty fast. Like, well, if you have faith enough, like, you got to be careful, because these little interpretations can be domino effect if you're not watching out, right? So yes, Peter gets out of the boat, and while he's got his eyes on Jesus, he starts walking on the water, and he's able to come to Jesus. But when he gets absorbed in what's going on around him, he becomes frightened, and he immediately began to sink, right? So again, there's that word immediately. And then we're going to see it a third time here. So, and these immediatelys happen related to points of distress and fear. The first one is when they go, it's a ghost, like we're in trouble. It's bad enough that we have a storm, but now we've got a specter on the water. And Jesus immediately says to them, take courage, don't worry. Peter becomes afraid, takes his eyes off Jesus, and immediately starts to sink, right? And he cries out, Lord, save me. Immediately, it says, Jesus stretched out his hand and took hold of him and said, you of little faith, why did you doubt? Again, this gets, I think, I'm not saying Jesus didn't say what he said, and I'm not saying Peter didn't kind of blow it here by taking his eyes off Jesus. But this whole text so often, maybe it's just in the world I grew up in, gets so spun into this sort of legalistic lecturing, like, don't be like Peter. And what I want to say is, Peter got out of the fucking boat. The rest of the guys wouldn't even get out of the boat. They wouldn't even do it, right? They wouldn't, they were back in the safety of, the relative safety of the boat. A stormy boat's better than walking on water if you start sinking, right? Like, they weren't relying on Jesus for anything at that point. Peter is relying on Jesus to get across the water. Did he doubt? Yes. Did he sink? Yes. And Jesus immediately sticks out his hand to rescue him. He says, save me, Lord. And Jesus does it. I don't want to miss all the things Jesus does in here in the midst of these things when people are in crisis. So this is why I really like this passage along with the Elijah, because Elijah is having a period of doubt. He's having a crisis in his faith, and God comes to him and tries to make him feel better with this sort of spectacular show, which doesn't work. Well, first with naps and food, then with a spectacular show, which ironically doesn't even work. And finally, he just goes, well, just go back and do your job, because don't worry, I got 7,000 more people doing their work too. With Peter has the courage and the tenacity and the faith to get out of the boat when nobody else would. And yes, he sinks because he stops looking at Jesus. And I do think that's a valuable thing to remember, is that it is easy to sink when you take your eyes off Jesus and look around at what's going on, because it can look like a complete dumpster fire globally, in your own life, in your home, in your kids, in your marriage, in your finances, like whatever it is. Maybe 6 or 7 of them at once, which is awesome. It's always great when they sort of dogpile you. But the point is, when you focus on that, it looks pretty disastrous. It looks pretty hopeless. But you've got a chance where you look at this and you go, okay, if I focus on Jesus, yes, there's a storm going on. But and you notice at that second, he has not calmed the storm, right? The storm is still going. He's going to calm the storm in a minute, but they're still in the storm, and Jesus is there. And that's the thing, is Jesus is there in the storm. Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy laden, and I'll give you rest. Take my yoke, okay, and learn from me. The yoke is, you're going to be 2 of us carrying it together. Like, this is the image. It's not just that everything works out hunky-dory, but Jesus will go, don't worry, it's me. Hey, whether it's God going, hey, Elijah, I got 7,000 you didn't know about, and it's not your job to know about them, but I'm going to go ahead and tell you so you can keep doing your work, even though, yes, Jezebel, does God say to Elijah, and by the way, I've taken care of Jezebel, she's not going to kill you? No, get back into the lion's den here. Go back into the mouth of the wolf. and do your job. I got a thing I'm doing. Peter, fellas on the boat, don't worry. Take courage. It's me. Peter failed. He jumps out. Please, can I come do this thing? Yes. Then he starts to doubt. Oh no, Lord help me. Immediately, hand outstretched. And the hand outstretched comes before the question, you have little faith, why did you doubt? And I want to kind of, I want to finish there. Not finish there, but I'm close to finishing, I promise. I love that that's the thing. Why did you doubt? Like, how funny to have enough faith to get out of the boat and then drop off. Like the other guys, they didn't even have enough faith to get out of the boat. Peter gets out of the boat and then he's like, oh shit. And that does raise an interesting sort of logic question. Like, you had the faith to get out of the boat. Why'd you quit now? Why quit now? You were out of the boat walking on water. Why did you doubt? And I actually think it's a great question. I think Peter probably reflected on that. Why did I doubt? It wasn't like it started storming when I got out of the boat. It had already been storming. I got out of the boat and started walking on water when it was storming. And then I thought about the storm. I looked around me and I made my focus the storm, and then I lost it. I just, the whole thing is an interesting question about why is it? And I, it's easy to take shots at the disciples, like when Jesus feeds thousands of people, and then the next time he's got a big crowd of people and says, let's feed them, they all go, how are we going to do that? Like, duh. There is this sort of thing where you look and go, are we never going to learn? But what I want you to notice in this is whether you're Elijah in a cave in a self-pity party, or you're Peter who somehow had the courage to do the hard part and step out of the boat, but then loses it. Jesus still says, don't worry, take my hand, I got you. And then he gets in the boat, and these other schnooks who wouldn't even get out of the boat, he gets in the boat, the wind stopped. And then those in the boat worship him and say, you certainly are God's son. Wow. Yeah, well, I bet Peter's feeling that a little bit more than y'all. I bet he's feeling it a little bit more than you are. Anyhow, stinking love these two passages. Can you tell? I love these two passages. And yes, should you walk away and on one hand go, in the case of Elijah, hey, maybe I shouldn't sit around and be self-pitying because God probably has some things going on I don't know about. And in the case of Peter, maybe I should have the courage to get out of the boat. And if I have the courage to get out of the boat, maybe I should, God's gotten me over that hump. Maybe I shouldn't sit around and doubt afterwards. Yes, those are all fantastic applications for your sermon. Thank you. Let's pray. Right? Like, there's the application points. There's usually that's in fact probably most of the time what I would have done in these sermons. But these are sermons for lost socks. So what I want to do is say, yeah, that's all good. But just like Paul in Romans 7, yeah, consider yourselves dead to sin and alive to Christ. But then Romans 7 comes along and says, but I don't do that sometimes. I really don't. And if you're not honest about that, if you're not honest and you say, oh, that's right, I can be as brave as Elijah one day and then as cowardly and self-pitying as Elijah the next. I can be as brave as Peter to get out of the boat, but then get fixated on my circumstances and fall in the water. And in both cases, what do you see God do? Take care of them. Meet them where they are. Extend a hand. Offer help. Take care of them. That's what God does. So there's the application I want to make sure you walk away with as well. It's easy to walk away from this and go, I need more faith. Yeah, right. I need more faith. I need to be thinner. I need to have, better Wi-Fi. All the things that would make life better. It would be great if I had more faith, and I would like more faith. Except I'm scared, by the way, of the process of getting more faith, because I think it usually means being put in situations that demand faith, and I'm frankly a wuss. But I think if we look at this and we say, okay, hold on, what's the takeaway here? The big takeaway is that God works with weak people, and he cares for weak people, and he's merciful and gracious and kind to weak people, especially weak people who try to follow, and then in these two cases, they were following, they were doing the right thing, and then, doubt shows up. And you got to be ready. Doubt's part of the equation. Doubt's part of the deal. No getting around it. But God's okay. He can deal with doubt. He really can. He's pretty big. Did you get that from these passages? God's pretty big. He's pretty big. Anyhow, this has gone on way too long, but I don't care. So just remember, Jesus loves you, and I wish grace, peace, and love to everyone.